We've had a checkered past here in Coffeeville, and our relations with the Native Americans and African Americans, like anything else, some is good, and well, some is bad. Now originally, the Native Americans thought that some of us, like the great explorer DeSoto, were gods. When DeSoto was looking for gold in the South, many Native Americans traveled west with him and his army and searched for gold and the Promised Land. Now, when they approached the big water you speak of, DeSoto became very sick. He died when they reached the present-day Memphis. They had to sneak his body away from the party and bury him in the big water just to retain his status as a god. Now, there are many special powers around the big waters of Memphis, just like the discovery of African-American music and the invention of rock and roll. There are markers of the white man's relationship with the Native Americans there too. Now look at the structure surrounding the bridge linking the east and the west. You can see the famous bridge linking Arkansas and Tennessee. It stands majestically as a tribute to the progress of industrialism. Now look north of the bridge, Rainey. What do you see?
A pyramid.
That's right. Now the pyramid is another lasting symbol of a civilization of long ago, the Egyptians. Now some say the Egyptians were visited by life forms from other worlds that taught them how to build the pyramids. They were said to possess special powers, and one of the great pyramids is said to rest in a spot where there is great power on the Earth's surface. Now great knowledge can be obtained at the site of the life forms. Now the Great Pyramid in Memphis, Tennessee marks a spot where Native Americans crossed the big water to the west, where they settled with the mound builders. It's also the site of important African American event. Now this symbolizes that we can work together with other cultures, regardless of color. Now another great pyramid in America rests in the sands near the big water to the west. Now just like the pyramids in Memphis and Egypt, this pyramid was just completed and is a sign that we are entering a new age. Now it's no coincidence that the new foundation of Native American economy is gaming. If you follow the construction of the pyramids, you can see the major eras of the existence of Native Americans in America. The crossing of the big water to their home in the east, the removal to the west, and the agreements with the federal and state governments to allow Native tribes to operate their own gaming facilities. Now Native American tribal casinos now taking more money per day than all of Las Vegas. Now this is a sign that Native Americans have accepted greed, and like the other eras, it'll end also. As more and more Native American tribal casinos are opened, just like the disease that enters an unused carcass, the gambling will become diseased and start to disintegrate. Now you must help your people and all people prepare for this day, Rainey. It'll come sooner than you think. Now we have a history that includes competition, greed, improvement, and peace. This includes our time in Coffeeville. Now Coffeeville was originally established by Mr. Coffee as a trading post on the border of Indian Territory to trade with Indians who crossed over the border into Kansas. Now one of the most famous Osage chiefs, Chief Black Dog, established the Black Dog Trail. Now Chief Black Dog stood over 7 feet tall and would trade with Mr. Coffee at his trading post on his way north to hunt for buffalo. Now the Black Dog Trail soon became well traveled by the Osage, and some even settled in the Coffeeville area. Now, Coffeeville became a rough and tumble cowtown in the late 1800s. Saloons, dance halls, and other businesses established themselves on Red Hot Street, catering to reckless cowboys. Now gambling became so prevalent that gamblers would hold games openly, and shootings became a nightly occurrence. Now the mayor of Coffeeville tried to gain control without much luck. Now it took the railroad, the discovery of oil, and a new majority of God-fearing citizens to bring law and order to Coffeeville. Coffeeville became a town of progress, and even became noted for the invention of the modern-day cowboy boot, fashioned for the left and right foot by John Cubine in his foot and shoe store. Now, this modernization of Coffeeville happened rather quickly, and news of it failed to spread to a group of people who remembered Coffeeville as a rough and tumble cowtown where they grew up. The Dalton Gang would make their ride into Coffeeville to cash in on the greed they knew as outlaws. It would be their last ride. Now the infamous Dalton Gang had ties to Coffeeville before they started their assault on the Wild West. Bob, Grat, and Emmett Dalton grew up in a large family of 15 children. Now, their father, Lewis Dalton, provided very little for the family and was generally known as a deadbeat. Now, while most of the Dalton children held legitimate jobs of one sort or another, Bob and Grat always had a wild eye about them. Now, they started their careers as marshals, but had no luck on the right side of the law. They soon became outlaws, and their little brother Emmett followed along with them. Now, Emmett was a good boy at heart, but followed the influence of his older brothers. Now, this is very important to remember. As the story of the White Rattlesnake tells, you are who you are, and you can't change the fate of your destiny. Now, they most likely began their careers as horse thieves, but were never convicted of any crimes related to stealing horses. They became famous as train robbers, using the knowledge they acquired as training for marshals to repeatedly rob trains in Indian Territory. Now, their plan to amass enough money to retire in South America required one last stop in the town where they grew up, Coffeeville, Kansas. Now, they knew Coffeeville pretty well and knew exactly what to do to pull off one of the greatest robberies in the history of the Old West, robbing 2 banks at one time while running from U.S. Marshals, of course. Now, they camped outside of Coffeeville in October and prepared for the heist. The banks would be full from the autumn harvest. The spirit of the White Rattlesnake entered their bodies as they breathed in the smoke from the campfire. Now, they would hitch their horses in front of a restaurant for a clean getaway. They'd enter the First National Bank and the Condon Bank simultaneously. Now, they were across the street from each other and around the corner. They would enter both banks, get the money, and meet back with the horses. They now needed disguises since they were famous, and some townspeople might recognize them. It was a perfect plan to an early retirement. The next day, the boys entered the town, but something was wrong. It wasn't as they remembered. The street where they planned on hitching the horses was under construction, and the hitching post was removed. The spirit of the White Rattlesnake urged them to press on. So they hitched their horses in an alleyway and walked into town heavily armed. Now, Alec McKenna of McKenna's Dry Goods knew something wasn't right when they walked by his store. The look of the White Rattlesnake was clear in their eyes. The chink of their spurs mimicked the hypnotic rattle of the rattlesnake's tail. And the smell of refined sugar and whiskey lingered as they passed by. Now, McKenna's intuition told him to follow the men into town. He recognized one of them as a Dalton in disguise. With 3 men entered the Condon and 2 entered the First National, McKenna saw the Condon being robbed by rifles and yelled the alarm to the townspeople. They armed themselves with pistols, rifles, and shotguns from the local hardware stores and waited for the robbers to emerge. When they emerged, they opened fire. Now, they exchanged fire for 15 minutes in what is now known as Death Alley. Now, 4 gang members and 4 citizens lay dead or dying. Dick Broadwell was the only gang member to make it out on his horse. He was found dead half a mile outside of Coffeeville. Now, Emmett Dalton, he was shot 23 times. Yes, 23 times, and did not die. He was pretty much good at his core, but the influence of his older brothers changed the way he viewed the world. Now, he survived, and after a long prison sentence, changed his ways until his death 45 years later. Now, Bob and Grat Dalton lay dead in those burial baskets over here. They are face down as a final sign of their eternal evil. Now, the Dalton defenders and Coffeeville citizens are a lasting belief that good will ultimately overpower evil. If the Coffeeville citizens had not changed Coffeeville from a rough and tumble cow town where they grew up to an upstanding community based on legitimate businesses and a lasting belief in God, the Daltons may have pulled off one of the greatest robberies in the history of the Old West and escaped to South America.